My name is Lee Barfield, and today is October 29th, 2003. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, to interview Wilson Sims. This interview is taking place as a part of the Legal History Project of the Fellows of the Tennessee Bar Foundation. What is your full name?
My name is Wilson Sims.
And when were you born?
I was born on Christmas Eve, 1924.
Okay. Now, is your full name Wilson? Is there something else in there?
No.
Just Wilson.
I have a nickname that has, gone with me all of my life. People call me Woody, but and a lot of people think that's related to Woodrow Wilson or something like that, but it's not. It's something my older brother hung on me at a young age when he couldn't say Wilson for some reason.
Okay. Where were you born, Woody?
I was born here in Nashville, Tennessee.
In what year?
1924.
Right. Tell us a little bit about your family. Your mother. Let's begin with your mother and father.
Well, my mother was from Obion County in West Tennessee, and not far from Reelfoot Lake. Her father was mayor of the town of Obion and a justice of the peace. Her grandfather, Mr. Henry Wilson, fought in the Civil War and lived a long time so that I knew him well. He used to take me fishing when I was a little boy, so I got to know my great-grandfather and a Civil War veteran, which is unusual. Her great-grandfather founded the county of Obion County, and so they were, the Wilson family was a prominent family in West Tennessee.
What about your father's family?
They were from North Georgia, a small town, Cave Springs, Georgia, and they lived part of their time in their early years in Birmingham. My grandfather was Charles Milton Sims, and my grandmother, Moselle Sims. They had married at a very young age, and they had 4 boys. My mother was an only child.
What was your mother's name?
Grace Wilson.
And then your father's name was what?
It was originally Charles Cecil Sims, but he dropped the Charles. I don't think he ever formally changed his name. He just quit using it.
Tell us a little bit about your mother and father and what they did, what their professions were and what they did.
Well, both of them graduated from law school, both mother and dad. Dad graduated from Vanderbilt Law School in 1914. Mother graduated, I think, in 1918. Could have been 19. Dad's education was unusual. He went to high school at Phillips High School in Birmingham, and from there went directly to law school. He never went to academic college at all. But he did very well. He graduated with the Founders Medal at Vanderbilt Law School, which is number 1 in his class.
Yeah. Now, your mother, Grace Sims, was she one of the early graduates of Vanderbilt?
Yes, I think she may have been the first woman graduate. I know she was the second woman graduate, a woman lawyer in Nashville.
Okay. Now, your dad Tell us a little bit more about Cecil Sims and his role in starting the law firm of Bass, Berry & Sims.
Well, Dad graduated from law school, and he went to work for the railroad, one of the railroads. And he was a claim agent and rode the caboose on freight trains. And when the train ran over a cow, set a haystack on fire, he'd get out and settle with the farmer. He did that for 2 years. And General Bass, Mr. F.M. Bass Sr., was the trial lawyer for the railroad. And he began to use Dad to interview witnesses and help him prepare for a trial. And they liked that association, and so they formed a law firm called Bass & Sims, and it had an office over in the Stallman building, and it existed for, I think, 3 years, maybe 4 years before they joined with Mr. F.A. Berry into Bass, Berry & Sims.
What year was Bass, Berry & Sims actually formed?
1922.
Okay. Now, we have a portrait here of your father.
Yes.
What was his age about the time that it appears in this portrait?
Well, this portrait was painted after Dad died in 1968. It was painted by Mr. Good Davis, who knew Dad well, and so he hardly needed photographs to go by to paint this portrait. I would say it portrays Dad at about 45 years old.
What was your father's influence, Woody, on your life and on your decision to practice law?
Well, first, his decision on my life, I guess, was the most important influence in whatever I did or have amounted to. But his decision, he never urged me to become a lawyer. I think I just assumed from an early age that I was going to be a lawyer. And I geared myself in that direction from the time, at least as a teenager, I was headed for law school.
What about your mother, Grace? She's a lawyer. Did she encourage you to practice law?
Well, she wanted me to be a professional of some kind, and law was the logical profession for me to follow.
Let's talk a little bit. Did your mother, Grace, did she ever practice law?
Not really. They married. Mother and Dad married shortly after she graduated from law school, and I think, I've heard her say that she consulted with Dad, or he would, they'd talk about it at night, the matters that he was involved in, and then she began to have children, and the idea of her practicing law sort of faded away. I think she would have liked to have practiced law.
Were there very many women practicing law in Nashville in the early 20s when Bass, Berry & Sims?
I don't think there were any. There was Miss Bertie Ryan was the librarian for the Nashville Bar Association Library, and she was the first woman to appear on the Nashville legal scene.
Let's talk a little bit about your grade school, your elementary school, and your high school experiences. Where did you go to school, and what was it like?
Well, I started at Palmer School, which was a neighborhood school. It was a public school, and it was about 1.5 miles from our home, and we frequently rode our bicycles or walked to school. We usually walked home because we couldn't be depended on to get to school on time unless somebody took us there. And so, but if it's pretty weather, we always walked home.
Where'd you go?
Rode a bicycle.
Where'd you go to high school?
I went to Webb School in Bell Buckle, Tennessee. My brother had gone there before I started, and I left Palmer School at the end of the 6th grade and went to Bell Buckle. So I was down in Bell Buckle 5 years.
Did your parents want you to go to Webb School, or did you want to go, or how did it turn out?
Well, I wanted to go because my brother was there, and they permitted me to go early, and I had gone down the year before and stayed in the dormitory with my brother, and I just thought that was great.
Tell us, what was your brother's name?
Cecil. He was Cecil Jr.
And tell us briefly about his life. He died early.
Yes. Cecil was a strong character, and he was physically strong too. He was a good football player, and heavier than I, and but not taller. Believe it or not, I at one time was 5'8". I'm probably a little less than that now, but I was the tallest person in the family. Dad was of short stature, and Cecil was of short stature, but he was stocky. He loved the outdoors, was a great hunter and fisherman, and he just he didn't do as well as he might have done in scholastic endeavors, but he was a very popular person. Everybody that knew Cecil liked him.
Did you and Cecil, how did you spend your summers in elementary school and in high school?
Well, we frequently worked on the farm, and as soon as we went to camp early when we were 10, 11, 12 years old. But I would say all of our teenage years, we worked on the farm during the summer months.
Where was your farm?
Dad and General Bass and Mr. Ennis Murray had a farm in Williamson County. It's where the Fieldstone Farms are now located. And it was originally 650 acres, and when General Bass died, they divided it, and Mr. Murray took a third, and Dad took 2/3, and ended up with 420 acres.
What were your most favorite or least favorite chores on the farm?
Well, the least favorite chore was cleaning out a fence row. we had a big old scythe that you'd have to swing sideways. The thing was bigger than I was, and I never did manage handling that scythe. I love the harvest better than anything, putting up the hay, picking the corn, and that sort of thing. Putting the hay in the barn. That was good.
Did y'all make any money farming back in those days, or did you do it for fun, or did you do it for provisions for the family, or what?
I think Dad, particularly in the early times, they made money because I don't think Dad would have done it if he hadn't made money on it. We had our money crops, and we raised a lot of animals, sheep and mules and cows and pigs, and yes, we made money, even in the Depression.
Woody, you went off to college in what year?
Well, I didn't go off to college because I started at Vanderbilt. I came home to college. I had been in Bell Buckle, and I started in June of 1942. Actually, I graduated from Webb School, I think, on a Sunday afternoon, and started Vanderbilt Monday morning.
Now, this is right during, at the beginnings of World War II.
Yes. World War II started. The Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor December 7th, 41. I was a senior in high school. So the war had been going on 6 months.
Was it the 41 or 42?
41.
41, December 7, 1941. Okay. And so you went to Vanderbilt for 1 year, and did you finish your college work at Vanderbilt?
No. I had joined the Marine Corps Reserve as soon as I was of age. And all of the reserves were called up in June 43, which is the end of my first year at Vanderbilt. And so I was sent by the Marine Corps. We were put in uniform and sent as Marines to the University of North Carolina. And I stayed there for 1 year and left there in June 44 on a program toward Officers Candidate School.
Okay. And where did you go to Officer Candidate School? When and where?
Well, I first had to go through boot camp in the Marine Corps. Everybody does that. And then I had to go to a staging area as fatalities and things happened in the Pacific. The need for officers would ebb and tide, and as officer candidates were needed, they would reach down into this staging area and pull out by age the number they needed. And I went to OCS at Quantico, Virginia in the fall of 44.
And when did you finish that? Or when did you get your commission?
In the spring of 45.
Okay. And what was your rank?
Second lieutenant.
Okay. Now, you mentioned your brother Cecil a little earlier. Was he involved in World War II?
Yes. Cecil was in the tank corps. He always wanted to drive a tank. It just suited his personality, and he set out to do that and went to tank training up here at Fort Knox and then overseas, and he was in the invasion of Europe. I think he landed at Omaha Beach on the third day of the invasion. As soon as they could get tanks there, I'm sure he was in the front line.
Who was his commanding general? Who did he work with?
General Patton. He was in the Battle of the Bulge, and he was very fond of General Patton. His correspondence indicates that.
And did he participate in the Battle of the Bulge?
Yes, he was first wounded in a little French town, St. Lo, L-O. And then he got some shrapnel of some kind, and they patched him up, and he went back to his tank. And he was in the Battle of the Bulge, just had entered Belgium when a big shell hit his tank and killed him.
Did you have any other siblings?
Yes, I have two sisters.
And tell us about your sisters.
Okay, my sister Grace, who most people call Susie, is married and lives in Franklin, Tennessee, and has children there and some in North Carolina. And my sister Bebe, whose name is Betty, lives in Atlanta, Georgia, and is married and has children there.
Now, did Susie or Betty, either one of them, join the profession of law?
No.
You know why not?
Well, I don't think it ever entered their minds to. They never talked to me about it. Susie is a writer and a painter of some note, and has written several books and has done very well painting. Beebe's just been a mama and a grandmama down in Atlanta.
Now, when you, back to your period of time, you get your commission in the Marine Corps,
Yeah.
and you go join the Marine Corps. What were your duties? This was what year?
Well, when I got my commission, that was spring of '45, and for some reason I was assigned to the intelligence branch of the Marine Corps and was assigned to a special project at Turner Field in Quantico. And that project was planning the invasion of Japan. And of course, I had a very, very minor role as a second lieutenant. Practically everybody else was a general or an admiral or a colonel or something.
How was the planning done, just briefly?
Well, we had a big hangar at Turner Field that was given to us for this project, turned over to us, and we had a mock-up of Tokyo Bay, really, in this hangar, and we were looking for the soft spots where the landings could occur and how to handle the artillery that was there. And the nets, we knew there were nets that would catch submarines and that kind of thing. So that was our job.
Was the general plan to be an amphibious landing similar to what the Allied troops had done
yes,
at Normandy?
actually there were to be 3 landings, and there was to be a fake landing, which we hoped, would draw fire, draw the troops and the artillery fire into that area, and then we would come in. But there was a plan to go into Tokyo, and the other 2 were south of Tokyo.
Now, later on that year, you come to Nashville on a visit.
Yeah.
To home.
Right.
And you get a telephone call.
Yeah. Oh, I know what you're talking about. My conversation with Mr. Sullivan Evans. Yes, I came home. It could have been the 4th of July. It was a long weekend or something, and could have been. No, it wasn't Labor Day. It was before Labor Day, and Dad had mentioned to Mr. Evans that I was going to be in town that weekend. And
who was Mr. Silliman Evans?
Mr. Silliman Evans was publisher of the Nashville Tennessean. He had come in and bought the Tennessean several years earlier. Tennessean was sold. Mr. Evans had been Undersecretary of the Navy and was very well connected in Washington. But anyway, he told Dad he wanted to see me, so I went down to Mr. Evans' office, and I was sort of impressed with my assignment as being intelligence and, and planning the invasion. Actually, I was carrying briefcases more than anything else, but I did do some map reading, but my role, I don't want to exaggerate my role. But Mr. Evans talking to me, and he said, well, what are you doing? And I said, Mr. Evans, I'm in a top secret situation, and I can't discuss it with you. And he said, well, it doesn't matter. I said, the war's going to be over in another month. I said, up here at Oak Ridge, they have developed a bomb that they're going to drop over there on Japan, and that's going to blow up everything, and the Japanese can't withstand that, and the war's going to be over. And I said, Mr. Evans, I believe if there was such a bomb, I would know about it. And he said, he looked at me and sort of funny, and he said, well, not many people know about it. And I didn't believe it. And then, you know, about 3 weeks later, here it was on all the news that we had dropped the bomb.
And did your military career then come to an end shortly after we dropped the bomb?
Everybody's came to an end because the war was over shortly after that. And I got out in probably November of 45.
And what did you then do after you got out of the Marines?
I had fortuitously, in 2 years, graduated from college. My year at Vanderbilt and 1 year at North Carolina gave me enough credits. I took every course I could take. I mean, 20 hours, 27 hours a semester was not too much. I took courses, seminars at night, whatever, to get through. I wanted to get as much behind me as I could.
What was your rush? Why did you feel?
Well, I wanted to go to law school when the war was over. If I made it through the war, I wanted to go to law school. And so the Vanderbilt Law School had closed during the war. The professors all went in the service, or a lot of them did, and the students do. So the Vanderbilt Law School was not going to reopen until September of 46. But North Carolina was going to open in January of 46. So that was an easy decision. I went to North Carolina and got a whole year, academic year, jump on other law students. So I went to North Carolina and stayed there 2 years.
And then did you return to Vanderbilt Law School?
Yeah, I stayed there the equivalent of 2 years because actually we went around the calendar in those days. There wasn't any summer break.
When did you get your degree from Vanderbilt?
June 48.
Okay, and then you went into, then what did you do after
Well,
you
I got married.
Got married.
Yeah.
Tell us about getting
that was
married.
a big event, and I started practicing law. The scariest time of my life was Linda and I were engaged, and I hadn't heard from the bar exam. And nobody was real sure I was going to have a job, you know. So we sweated that out, and I heard from the bar exam about a week before the marriage.
And tell us about Linda.
Well, Linda was from Springfield, Tennessee, and she had, I had known her in high school, but not well. And she graduated from high school there. She was quite a basketball player at Springfield High. And I think as the years go on, she was a better and better basketball player. And she was a cheerleader for the famous Springfield High School football team. They never lost a game while she was in high school. So she was sort of big stuff in Springfield.
What was her maiden name?
Linda Bell.
And her family, what did they do?
Well, the most famous thing they did historically was the Bell Witch. She is a direct descendant of John Bell, in whose home the Bell Witch came. But anyway, her daddy was a furniture merchant and ran the funeral home in Springfield.
Did you, was it love at first sight, or did it take you a while to persuade her?
Well, she was in the back of my mind, you know, but during the war years, there just wasn't time for thinking about that too much. But when I was in law school at Chapel Hill, I bumped into her. She was a student at Duke University, which is just 10 miles down the road. And Linda and her mother and her grandmother were visiting the University of North Carolina campus, and I walked right in front of their car, and Linda hollered at me, and so when I found out she was over there, that was an important discovery. And I had a motorcycle then. I couldn't afford a car, but I'd bought an old Indian motorcycle. Indian was the maker of the motorcycle, and so I sort of began to run that 10 miles between Chapel Hill and Durham pretty regularly, and so that's where we. And then Linda graduated from Duke, and she went to New York. She was a professional model up there, and she didn't like that a bit, and came home and went to work for the Robeson County Welfare Department, and we decided to get married.
Now, there are going to be maybe some grandchildren and children of lawyers and others that are viewing this one of these days, and they'll want to know about this Indian motorcycle. I was wondering a couple of things. One, did your mother ever have any, did she know about it? Number
No,
one.
I didn't think she knew about it. I certainly didn't tell her. And the issue came up when I was, our grandchildren had grown up, and one of them wanted a motorbike or a motor scooter or something like that. And I said, I'd rather buy you a submachine gun than a motorbike. And Mama was sitting there, and she said, well, you had a motorcycle in law school. And I turned and I said, how did you know that? She never would tell me who told her that.
Mothers have a way of knowing. You took and passed the Tennessee bar.
Yes.
In what year?
In those days, we took the bar our senior year, in February of the senior year, and you heard sometime during the following summer.
What do you remember about the bar exam? Did you have a multi-state section of the multiple choice part of the bar exam? Was it all essays or what?
Oh, in those days, the bar exam, there wasn't any national exam, you know. The bar exam, as you know, as far as a former bar examiner, 4 or 5 old lawyers sat around and wrote questions. And about half of it was Tennessee procedure, and most of it was sort of trick questions. And everybody that took it with me thought they flunked, including me. I was terrified by the bar exam. And it took them forever to grade the papers because they were all written out in longhand.
Were there a lot? Do you remember a lot of students, a large number of students taking it when you took it, or was it just a handful?
They were, I guess, in February of '48, there were 25 in Middle Tennessee took it. There were only 3 or 4 from Nashville, Vance Berry and Bill Woods, and I don't know. There were only about 5 lawyers joined the bar the year in 1948, new lawyers.
Did you?
John Connors was another one that took it.
Did you? Where'd you go to work? Did you have a job?
You know, I always thought I did, but it wasn't formalized. You know, nobody rushed me to be a young lawyer at Bassbury and Sims. When I graduated, I sort of just meekly put on a coat and tie and came to town. Probably rode with Dad, and I didn't have a car. And there wasn't any place to put me. And I got a seat in the library at the library table, and that was my office.
So you didn't get taken to dinner and wined and dined?
Nobody No. The answer's no.
Well, did somebody say, "Hey, Woody, we want you to practice law with us," or anything like that?
I don't think so.
Did you just move into an office?
I just went to town one day with Dad and went up to the office and sat down in the library, and somebody gave me something to do, and I'll come back to what they gave me to do. Jimmy Bass is the one who gave me something to do, Big Jimmy. I went to work.
Were there any salary negotiations? Did you?
No,
you say I'll work for this, but not that?
I tell you, jobs for young lawyers were hard to come by. John Connors, for example, who is one of the finest trial lawyers we've had here in Nashville, he couldn't get a job in Nashville, and he was a bright fellow who'd done very well in law school, and he went in Phoenix to practice law for a while, and finally Mr. William Hume brought him back here, but it was it was not a buyer's market for young lawyers.
What did the firm of Bass, Berry and Sims pay you when you started?
$75 a month, which is exactly half what my wife made as a welfare worker.
Tell us what your first job was. The first
project
job that Mr.
involved the construction of the will of Mr. Monroe C. Mundy, M-O-N-D-A-Y, who was a very wealthy gentleman who controlled the Cumberland Cement Company and other companies. And the children and the other heirs were at odds as to what the will meant, and also as to the execution of the will. And the will had appointed Mr. Vance Alexander as executor and trustee, and Mr. Alexander was president of Union Planters Bank. And when the will contest was brought, Mr. Alexander hired our firm to defend the will.
And you worked with Mr. Bass, Mr. Jimmy Bass, on that?
Dad did tell me, and this was about all the instruction I got from him, he said, I trained Jimmy Bass, and Jimmy Bass can train you. So he put me under Jimmy's wing, which was a very fortuitous thing for me, because Jimmy was, as you know, a precision taskmaster.
Yes.
You know, things have to be done exactly right and on time, and that was sort of hard on me.
Now, you have told us that Bass, Berry & Sims started in 1922.
Yes.
So you joined it in 1948.
Yes.
Right? How many lawyers were in the firm in 1948 when you joined it?
I think there were 6. There was Mr. Berry and Dad and Jimmy and Bill Berry and Judson Hallwood and Frank Bass. That was it.
Okay, tell us a little bit about what each one of those lawyers did and what the firm was like in 1948 when you started.
Well, Mr. Berry, who was this senior man, he was the oldest person we had.
Now, this is Mr. Frank Berry.
Mr. Frank Berry, he was probably in his middle or late 60s at that time. And he was the dean of the corporate lawyers in Tennessee. I'm going to say that without reservation. And he was recognized that. And he handled, he was a director of the American Bank, which is now First American and now AmSouth. And he handled the bank business. He handled the Washington Manufacturing Company business. He did work for Genesco, which was then General Shoe Company. And he did the big corporate business in Nashville. Dad was next in line, and he was sort of a jack of all trades. He could do the corporate work, and he was a director of 4 or 5 big business enterprises here in Nashville, such as National Life, and Murray, Ohio Manufacturing Company, Spur Oil, and that kind of thing. But he did the heavy trial work. Lawyers from around the state would get him to help them try their big cases, and that was a big part of his business. Plus, clients came to him, and asked him to try their cases. He was a big trial lawyer, jury lawyer. Joe Henry, who was the Chief Justice of Tennessee Supreme Court, and when he would describe the lawyers in Tennessee, he liked to talk about my father. And what he would start out and say is, and it was a truism, he said, Dad can turn a jury around and turn a jury against you in your own hometown quicker than any lawyer in Tennessee. And I've seen him do that. So he was had an infectious way with juries, and used it to the hilt.
Good storyteller?
Wonderful storyteller, yeah.
And now, okay, so the Bass, Barry and Sims, the Bass in the name is Frank.
Was F.M. Bass Sr.
Let's talk about Mr. Bass.
We had Colonel Bass, who was Frank Bass Jr., and we had James O. Bass, whom I have referred to as Jimmy.
Okay. So that's a little confusing for us. Let's clarify that. When we started in 1922, the Bass in the firm name Bass, Barry and Sims is which one of the Basses? Were there several of them?
No.
There's just one?
No. General F.M. Bass. He'd been Attorney General Davidson County.
Okay.
And he was General F.M. Bass.
Now tell us a little bit about General Bass.
Well, he tried some very famous cases, the most famous of which was the murder trial of Dr. Feast, of Dr. Feast's girlfriend, really. Dr. Feast was the defendant. And that was the most celebrated murder trial in Middle Tennessee for many, many years, and may still be.
Was he prosecutor at the time?
Yeah, he prosecuted that
Attorney
case.
General. Did he get a conviction?
Yes, he did. The Supreme Court reversed it, but he got the jury verdict.
Okay, so that's General Bass, and then you'd mentioned Frank Bass.
Frank Bass Jr.
Jr., the corporate lawyer.
Yeah, Frank Bass Jr. was a brilliant fellow. He, too, was founders medalist at Vanderbilt Law School and went on and got his master's degree in English and then came to practice law. Okay. He joined the firm about 1932.
Okay, back to 1948 then. We had in the firm, when you joined Bass, Barry and Sims, we had Frank Bass Jr., Cecil Sims, and who else was in the firm?
Well, Jimmy. Jimmy joined the firm in 1934. And he was a brilliant fellow. He went to Harvard Law School and did well, and he has been an outstanding lawyer here in Nashville.
And that's James O. Bass?
That's James O. Bass.
Okay, and you call him Jimmy. What kind of work did Jimmy do?
Jimmy did trial work. He also did a good portion of the telephone company work. He and my father tried the rate cases in those days. Rate cases, well, if the telephone company wanted to increase the rates they charged, they had to get approval from the Public Service Commission. And Dad and Jimmy would try those cases. He tried automobile cases, automobile wreck cases for insurance companies. After Mr. Berry died, Jimmy became a director of the bank, and his practice sort of shifted to bank practice. He had always sort of represented the trust department of the bank.
Tell us about Mr. Berry, the name, the Berry whose name's in the firm
F.A.
name.
Berry, Frank Berry,
Yes.
Sr. Well, I did. I said he was the dean of the corporate lawyers in Tennessee.
Then his son was F.A. Berry.
F.A. Jr.
Okay, who later joined the firm.
He joined the firm, I believe, 2 years after I did.
Okay. So who else was in the firm in 1948? Have we covered everybody?
No, Bill Berry.
Bill Berry. Tell us about Bill Berry.
Bill Berry was largely a tax and probate lawyer. He was, I think, the outstanding probate lawyer in Nashville and maybe in the state. I know lawyers all over the state consulted with him. He really studied the probate law. He kept current in tax law by going to NYU for a refresher course every year. He was respected by all the accounting firms here in Nashville, and they were the major source of his business. But Bill was the probate tax lawyer, and he was the business manager of the law firm. He hired secretaries and that sort of thing, bought typewriters.
Anyone else in the firm at Bass, Berry & Sims when you started?
Well, Judson Hallwood. Judson had come in to help Dad and Mr. Berry during the war when Jimmy and Frank and Bill Berry all went into service. And Judson was there and did a lot of the trial work. Represented the insurance companies that we represented, and Judson developed a specialty in truck companies, motor freight, and in those days, all the routes of the truck companies had to be approved by the Public Service Commission, and he was an expert in doing that.
The firm of Bass, Berry & Sims was built in its early years on hiring really family members, yourself and the Basses and others. Does the firm allow the hiring of sons and daughters of partners now?
No. We have an anti-nepotism there. My son, I think, wound that up. They told me that if he wanted to be a lawyer, they'd let him in, but after that, no more. So my son came up and worked one summer and decided he didn't want to be a lawyer, so that ended the bloodlines in the law firm.
Let's talk a little bit about the, let's talk about the anti-nepotism rule for just a minute. Why did the firm adopt that rule? Do you think that's a good rule or not?
Well, I think it was a good rule for our law firm at that time, because about that time, law firms began to compete for recruits, and the other law firms, our competitors, were using the family argument against our prospective young lawyers. They were saying, you'll never get anywhere at that law firm because you're not a Bass or a Berry or a Sims. And so we had to put a stop to that. And the anti-nepotism rule worked well to do that.
Let's talk a little bit about the daily routine of the practice of law in the early years, in the 48s and 50s and so forth. What would you all do? What was a day like at the firm and really a week?
A day started in Dad's office, and Bill Berry and Jimmy Bass and I and Dad. Mr. Berry didn't come in till later, and neither did Colonel Bass. But and Judson Harwood would come in these meetings, and we would open our mail together, and we would talk about, what we were going to do that day, if we were engaged in trial or about to enter a trial. We'd talk about that and get the advice of everybody there, and we would fix fees. If somebody had completed a job, he'd say, "Now," I would say, "Now, I've finished this. I have collected a note that I had to sue on and levy on, and I've collected a note now." And they'd all say, "Well, what are you going to charge?" And I'd say, "Well, $250 or something like that." And they'd all say, "That's too much." And they never said that's not enough. Whoever would propose a fee would get knocked down a little bit.
How did you all determine the value and what to charge?
Well, we determined
what was the basis?
Different from nowadays. We determined it on what we accomplished for the client and how valuable we had been to the client. That was the measure of the fee. If we hadn't accomplished anything, we didn't charge anything. We didn't charge for time. That was our problem, not the client's. And of course, plaintiff lawsuits were brought on a contingent fee, and if we didn't win, we didn't get anything. We had several big clients, like General Shoe, and First American Bank, and National Life. We had retainer fees. And unless we did something extraordinary, we weren't allowed to charge above the retainer. The retainer took care of it.
Was the retainer, did the client pay the firm on a monthly basis?
Yes.
On the retainer?
I think some of them were on an annual basis, but most of them on a monthly basis.
Did you, when you sat down in the late 40s and early 50s with a client, and the client would say, well, what are you going to charge me? What would you say?
I'd say first, let me go back. You said in the late 40s and early 50s. I didn't set many fees myself with big clients in those days. Somebody higher up the totem pole did that. But I would say we'll charge on the basis of what we can do for you on this matter. And if we can't help you, we won't charge you. But if we do help you, then we'll need to be paid the value of what we have accomplished. That was about the only discussion that I remember having.
When you talked about the morning meetings, opening the mail together, what time did you get in to open the mail? What time would you start the day?
Oh, I would say somewhere between 7 and 8 to 7:30 probably.
Did you work on Saturdays?
We worked Saturdays. Court met on Saturday. Motion day was Saturday morning, and whether you had a motion or not, most all lawyers went over to hear the motions argued, and certainly the young lawyers did. And that was a learning experience. We would watch the big lawyers argue their motions in the circuit and chancery courts.
Who were some of the big lawyers that you learned from in your early years of practice at Bass, Berry & Sims?
Well, I tried. There were certain lawyers that if they were going to argue, I made sure I was going to hear it if I could, if I didn't have some conflict somewhere. Well, of course, my father and Jimmy Bass and Mr. Berry and Mr. Seth Walker was another one, Mr. George Armstead. Those were my icon-type lawyers.
What about the gathering spot for Nashville lawyers during those years? Were there many? How many lawyers were at the Nashville bar?
There were 300 approximately when I started practicing law, and within a year, I knew every one of them. We all knew each other.
And did you get a chance to visit with them informally? How did that work?
We had a lot more congeniality than we do nowadays. We, on the way back from the courthouse, as soon as we got through with the mail, if I didn't have a trial, I'd go make my courthouse run in the early days and file papers for other lawyers and, check the dockets to if I had a trial coming up, see whether it was actually going to get a trial. They'd set more cases than they had judges, and you get bumped off if all the cases ahead of you were tried. So I'd check that situation. If I was running a title, I would go by the registrar's office and check the title and that sort of thing. So I'd make a courthouse run first thing in the morning. On the way back from the courthouse, I would stop at the coffee shop. We had a coffee shop called the Bullpen, which had really been a bar and had been the submarine bar and was down in the basement of where this building stands now on 3rd Avenue. And the other lawyers would do the same thing I did, and there would be 8 or 10 or 15 lawyers there drinking coffee and talking and swapping tales.
Did you could you trust the other lawyers when you were working with them, or did you have to put everything in writing?
Well, you knew who you could trust and you knew who you couldn't. And there were only 3 or 4 lawyers in Nashville bar that you had to document what they said. And everybody knew who they were. So it was easy. The rest of it, a handshake, a telephone call was all you needed from the other lawyer, and the deal was done. The deal was made, whatever the deal was.
Why don't we take a break?
Okay. Am I talking too much?
Woody, before we talk a little bit about your career as a lawyer, I want to talk for a few minutes about your children and your and Linda's children. Tell us about your children and your grandchildren.
Well, I have 3 children and 4 grandchildren. And I'll start with the oldest. The oldest is Linda Rickman Sims Baer. She's married to Jerry Baer, and they live in Boca Raton, Florida. She is a doctorate level clinical psychologist. She got a master's degree and then went on and got a doctorate degree in Chicago. She has practiced, they have no children. She practiced in several different places in Chicago, and her husband is older than she and has basically retired so they can move anywhere they want to. And about every 5 years they do make a move. And they went to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and she had a practice there. Then they went to Pinehurst, North Carolina, and she had a practice there. And now she's developed it doesn't take her long for people to come to her for help in the psychological area. And she also works for a live hospice and other people other entities that need psychologists. She's an expert on several things such as dreams. She's written several learned papers about dreams and has given a good many seminars on dreams. She's an interesting person.
Who is your number two?
Number two is Suzanne. And Suzanne was married for a while, had 2 children, lived in Chattanooga. She taught school in her early married life, and she taught first in Jasper, Tennessee. She taught school, and then she taught handicapped children in the Chattanooga school system. And then she and her husband were divorced. They had 2 sons. And she needed a different outlet, and she began to work in outdoor projects. And she was hired by Outward Bound. She first went through Outward Bound program, and then she has been an instructor for about 15 years in the Outward Bound program, and she's also done programs for NOLS, National Outdoor Life Association, or whatever that
National is. Outdoor Leadership.
Yeah,
leadership.
Yeah. So she works in the wintertime in the Everglades, and she works in the summertime up near us in North Carolina, in Franklin, North Carolina. She's the Target stores published in their little book magazine an article on Suzanne 2 years ago, I think it was, maybe last year, about how she changed her focus of her life in midlife and how she has become so successful in the outdoor life and training others in outdoor life. So she's an interesting person too. And I'll come back to her 2 children. Well, I'll just take them now that I mentioned them. She has 2 boys. The oldest is Jeffrey, and Jeffrey has been a leader-type person. Both the boys went to Baylor School in Chattanooga. Jeffrey was president of the student body there, and he got scholarship offers everywhere, but he wanted to go to Williams College up in Massachusetts, and he did and excelled there, graduated with honors, and one of his real interests is running, cross-country running. he was captain of the cross-country team at Williams, and they won the whatever conference they're in up there. And he also was an all-state runner while he was at Baylor, and he was captain of the cross-country team there. So after he graduated from Williams, he wanted to do something different, and he was hired to teach in a school in Ascension, Paraguay. And it was an English-speaking school. And so for a year, he went to Paraguay and taught there. And then he came back and has taught the last 2 years at Webb School in Bell Buckle, Tennessee, and is going to leave teaching at the end of this year and pursue his master's degree so that he can advance in the teaching profession.
What's Jeffrey's last name?
Jeffrey Edmonds.
Okay, and what's his brother's name? The other
Philip.
Philip. Tell us about Philip.
Philip is not quite the scholar that Jeffrey has been, but he is a good student, and he graduated from Baylor and then went to Appalachian State, and he's an outdoorsman like his mama and sort of like his granddaddy. He went to Appalachian State and studied such things as forestry and geology, and then he went out west, and he wanted to make some money, so he's a good skier, and he's a member of the ski patrol at Jackson Hole, and he works in a hardware store there in the off seasons, and waits tables in a restaurant. And neither one of the boys are married, although Jeffrey is engaged to be married next spring.
And then you have a son.
I have a son, Wilson Jr., who lives in Asheville, North Carolina. And he went to school at Chapel Hill and had a good career in school there. Was a close friend of our Congressman Jim Cooper there, and Jim helped him along. Jim's a year older, and then he was in all of the high student political positions over there on the honor committee and things like that. And then he came to, and then after he did that, he taught school and coached basketball at Durham Academy in Durham, North Carolina. And then he came back to Vanderbilt and got his MBA. And then he got into the fundraising business in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and he stayed there for a couple of years and was hired to work in Columbia, South Carolina, and he didn't like that work, so he went into business for himself. And he's in a consultant business for small colleges and prep schools and other charities, and has offices in Asheville and Columbia, South Carolina, and is doing very well at that.
Is he married?
He's married. He married, and he lives in Asheville, and he married the mayor's daughter of Asheville, who is a physician and a very fine orthopedic surgeon who's recently retired. Ann, his wife, is a She has a master's in nursing. She has taught nursing, critical care nursing at Duke and at Bowman Gray at Winston-Salem and in Asheville when they moved back. But she has 2 daughters, and she's sort of withdrawn from the practice of nursing right now. She's raising children. She is a swimmer and an athlete. She has run in the Ironman in Hawaii a couple of times. Her mother coached the swimming team for the Olympics about 4 Olympics ago, and her sister won a silver medal in that, in swimming. So they're an athletic family. Wilson still plays pickup basketball against his daddy's advice and his mother's advice. And he's a good tennis player too.
Let's talk about your career as a lawyer.
Okay.
What kind of practice did you have after joining Bass, Berry & Sims in 1948, and what kind of cases did you handle?
Well, of course, starting off, I did whatever nobody else wanted to do. You know, if something came in that was not a very attractive piece of business, it ended up on my desk. And I mainly did the note collections for the American Bank and General Sessions Court, and tried the small automobile wrecks. We represented some indemnity insurance companies, and I tried those, and then I moved up to trying jury cases and circuit court cases and chancery court cases. And I did that for 5 or 6 years. Of course, it was interrupted by the Korean War, where I was called back in the Marines for 2 years. But I practiced law I was sent to the U.S. Naval School of Justice in Newport, Rhode Island, and graduated there, and then was assistant legal officer at Parris Island, South Carolina, for the balance of the Korean War. So there's an interesting thing about that, and I always tell it because I'm sort of embarrassed to have, not embarrassed because there's nothing I could do about it, but I was in the Marines really over a 10-year basis, counting time I was in the active reserve. And I never went overseas, and most Marines are in combat long before that. But right before the Korean War, Congress passed an act that forbade the armed services send a young man into combat if he was the sole surviving son. And since my brother had been killed, I couldn't go. And so I did stateside duty in the Marine Corps. So anyway, I'll come back, but as a legal officer at Parris Island, I sort of continued my legal career.
When you were at Bass, Berry & Sims in the 50s, early 60s, did you have the opportunity to try some cases with your father, Cecil Sims?
Yeah. As I said, I had moved up to trying jury cases. And some of the cases that I began to try malpractice suits against Vanderbilt, against City Hospital, against Madison Sanitarium, and I think they were all insured by the same insurance company, and we represented that insurance company. So I got a mixture of medical malpractice.
Do you have any?
And I ended up trying at least one of those cases with that.
do you have any special memories of trying cases or case with your father?
Yeah, well, what I just said, one of the medical malpractice cases that I tried was with Dad. Yeah, there was a little boy at Vanderbilt Hospital from Hickman County, and I've forgotten why he was hospitalized, but he was, and he was a very sick little boy. And while during his stay at Vanderbilt, one night he tried to climb out the window and run away from the hospital. And he tried to climb down a downspout from the gutter, and he fell, and it broke his neck, and it killed him. And the hospital was sued for neglecting the boy and said that somebody should have been with him, or he should have been restrained in bed. That this should not have happened. And Mr. Olin White, who was the head man malpractice plaintiff lawyer, brought the suit. And the file ended up on my desk, and I did the pre-trial work on it, and located the witnesses and all. And as time for trial got nearer, I realized this was going to be big, and I got Dad to help me, and he did, and he participated just enough so that the jury would know he was involved. But he let me, cross-examine the mama and daddy, and I had gotten them to admit that they were offered the opportunity to stay with the boy if they thought it was necessary, and they had elected to go back to Hickman County the night he died. So, and I did all examine the doctors and the nurses, and he examined one or two nurses just to keep in front of the jury. And then it came time to argue the case, and Olin had done his usual very good job, and we were in a scary position, and there was all the sympathy in the world for this family and this little boy. So Dad said he would argue the case, which suited me fine because I was terrified. And he did a remarkable job. Mama said that he had worked all night on his argument, hadn't even gone to bed, and taken a shower and put on a clean shirt and come to court. So he started off, Olin White had said that the little boy was frightened, and Dad began to defend the little boy. And he said, this is a boy raised on a farm. He missed the farm animals, the cows, the pigs, the horses on the farm, and he wanted to go home. And he was not frightened. He was a brave little boy. Otherwise, he wouldn't have tried to climb out that window and go down that downspout. And then he defended the mama and daddy for not staying. Everything I was trying to prove, he just let go, pitched it aside. And he said they made the correct decision. They should not be required to stay in the hospital with that boy. He had the best nursing care that medical science could produce. And one of the nurses had described how she had come in and tucked this little boy in at night before he went to bed. And he said, if this had been my child, I would have wanted the nursing care this boy got. I would have wanted a nurse to tuck him in and tell him good night. And he said, the nurse testified the little boy smiled and seemed okay. And Dad said, you know, what more can you ask? And anyway, the jury decided in our favor. And the ironic part about it, the mama jumped up and started hugging Dad because he had defended her and her boy.
Yes.
In the case, and she had turned down $50,000 right before the trial, and she was thrilled to death with the outcome of that case. So that's kind of trial lawyer he was. I tried a labor case with Dad in Humboldt. It's the only labor case I ever tried with him, and that was a terrible mistake from my standpoint because I ended up being a labor lawyer after that. He wanted out of the labor law business, and he had a big practice. So
you became a labor lawyer, and how many years did you do the labor work?
Until I could turn it over to Russ Morris and Bill Osher. That's exactly how, whenever they came, and I spent probably 2 years with them before I backed out. And they took it over, and they've done a wonderful job with it. At that time, we had the biggest labor practice in the South, according to the NLRB statistics, and it was a tiring, tough on family life type practice because, you know, you get in a bargaining session, and I've seen the sun come up a lot of mornings in a bargaining session. You get in strikes. And that's a scary and dangerous situation. I had one strike where we had 27 instances of gunplay, and that's not a comfortable situation when you go home and face your family.
You also, in your career, represented a number of corporations.
Yes.
What did you do for the corporations, and
well, I did everything.
What practice did you have?
When I began to back out of the labor law, one of the reasons was my corporate practice had developed so that I needed to spend more time with it. I was either general counsel or director of, I counted them up this morning, 10 public companies. And that took an enormous amount of time. And I had carried 3 of those public with the SEC, and I had all the reporting stuff to do. I had one of them was a life insurance company and I really ended up spending 3 days out of the office every week. Monday was Martha White, and I would generally either Sunday night or early morning get on an airplane, and the president and I would go somewhere and try to buy a flour mill or a corn mill.
Now this is Martha White, the self-rising flour.
You betcha. You know, we never have anything in our house but Martha White, and you know, as old Ern would say, Ernie Ford, it's pea picking good. So that was Monday, and Jimmy King and later Bobby Dale, who were the presidents, we put a lot of miles on the airplane flying around the South. Tuesday, I would go to Baird Ward. I ended up being chairman of the board of Baird Ward, which was a very large printing company here in Nashville. We printed the Baptist Sunday School stuff. We did the telephone directories. We did magazines such as Field and Stream, Southern Living, Parents Magazine, Reader's Digest. We had one of the biggest printing operations in the South, and I had an executive committee meeting there every Tuesday morning, and generally enough stuff I had to do at Barfield Ward, where I stayed there all day. And then Wednesday, I went to the life insurance company. And in the beginning, we had to get it qualified in all the different states, and then we had to write the policies, and then I had to handle all the claims. We didn't have a claims department. I was the claims department.
What was the name of the life insurance?
Forest Life.
Was it
Two
headquartered here?
R's, F-O-R-R-E-S,
Okay.
just like Nathan Bedford.
Uh-huh. And it was headquartered here in Nashville?
Headquartered here in Nashville. Fortunately, those three companies were. And Thursday and Friday and Saturday, I'd go to Bassberry and Sims.
That's great. Did you get into any big litigation with any of those companies? Or what's the...
Well, I was in litigation, I guess, with all of them, but the biggest litigation was with the life insurance company. Barfield Ward, the biggest litigation we had was labor. Mm-hmm. And I did continue to handle the Barfield Ward labor. We had pressman strike at Barfield Ward, had two, and they were very troublesome. But then at Martha White, we didn't do other than negotiate the purchase of other companies. We didn't do much law business. I'd write corn contracts where we'd, buy a farmer's field of corn. We'd buy it on the stalk, and then pick it and make cornmeal out of it. But the life insurance company ended up in some very serious litigation. We sold the company, and
what year was that when Forest Life was
I'm
sold?
trying to think, and I really can't, but it was probably the late 60s, early 70s. And we sold it to Republic National Life in Dallas. And for the purchase price, we took stock, Republic National stock. And about 6 months after we had closed the deal, we learned through a Securities and Exchange investigation and by an investigation by the Insurance Commissioner of Texas that Republic had falsified its books, and that the stock which we had received was not worth near what we thought it had been worth. And we brought a securities fraud case here in Nashville. Of course, they were class action cases brought against Republic National and its officers and directors and accountants. And my initial job was to keep our case separate. I didn't want to get involved in the class action stuff. And it was referred to the Court of Complex Litigation in San Francisco. And I had to go to New York and get it in Southern District of New York to get it referred to that court. And so I argued the case in New York. And then I had to argue it in San Francisco for the Court of Complex Litigation. And it was referred to the home office, to Dallas, the federal court in Dallas, and we kept it out of the class action. So then we had to go to trial. And I spent a year in Dallas, just I'd come home on most weekends, not all of them, get ready to try that case, taking discovery depositions and going through their files. And then on the absolute eve of the trial, we had good lawyers against us. Bacon Botts were the lawyers on the other side, and the head lawyer was their head litigator. Harding was his name. And I had Jim Cheek with me and Mike Peake helping me with the, compiling the documents and discovering where the fraud actually was and who committed it, that kind of thing. So, anyway, we settled it in the airport hotel in Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. Webb Follen, who was chairman of Forest Life, and I were there meeting with the Baker Botts lawyers and with the insurance commissioner, because the insurance commissioner had taken over the company. And so we had to not only settle with the company, we had to get his blessing. And
was it a financial settlement? They paid money or
we didn't take stock
this time. No stock this time.
No, we'd already done that. We took money, and we took more money than had ever been collected in a securities fraud case in the United States ever before. So we came home smiling.
And Woody, you have always been an active participant in Bar Association activities, and certainly the Tennessee Bar Association. Tell us about how did you get involved or decide to get involved in TBA activities, Tennessee Bar activities?
Well, I'd been involved first in Nashville Bar stuff, and I had been president of Nashville Bar. I believe I looked up this morning in 1966. And then I started to run for president of the Tennessee Bar shortly after that. But the press of other things crowded around me, and I had to back off and tend to business and family and other things, and so I didn't do it. And I had gone to a bar convention in Gatlinburg, and I was interested in several issues. The ethics and professionalism of lawyers was becoming into question across the country. I was interested in continuing legal education, and I was interested in the IOLTA program, and the executive secretary then, Billy Bethel of the Bar Association, suggested, she said, there's going to be a vacancy at the chairmanship of the House of Delegates. And she said, I want you to announce for that. And I said, well, she said, you won't have any opposition. So, I don't know, in a weak moment I did. And I enjoyed my year, maybe 2 years, as chairman of the House of Delegates. And during that time, I got the programs, the IOLTA and the continuing legal education, and some effort at upgrading the professionalism. I got those things started. And so I decided to run for president. And I did. But my opponent, who was my good friend, John Toon, got a few more votes than I did. And so John was president, but the next time it came up, I didn't have any opposition, and ended up being president, and fortunately got the Supreme Court to adopt all of the programs that I've mentioned.
What is the IOLTA program? What briefly?
Well, Barry here can explain it better than I can. But basically, lawyers have trust funds. In this firm, we collect money for a client. It may stay in our account for 2 or 3 days. The banks were paying interest to the law firm. And there was a question as to whether that interest should go to the client. And some of the banks wasn't paying anything, and which, now that I think about it, was the biggest case. There were more of them. So it's a question to whom that interest belonged. And the idea wasn't original in Tennessee. There were other states that had developed a program where that money was paid, the interest on lawyer trust funds was paid into a special account, and then the money was used for some of it for legal education, some of it to help with the pro bono questions, and some of it for legal aid, and that was an intriguing program. And of course, the banks were not anxious to turn loose of that money. And some of the lawyers that were collecting interest on the money that held in trust funds, which was a questionable conduct, they weren't anxious to turn loose. And so there was some controversy about how this was all going to come about. But I filed the petitions with the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court approved the program.
Now, on the continuing legal education, you mentioned that as one of your interests there. What was the situation, what was the problem, and what was the need for additional continuing legal education?
Well, we frankly had some incompetent lawyers that had gone to law school 20 or 30 years ago and hadn't studied law much since then. And also, we needed a chance to teach the lawyers more about ethics and professionalism. And with mandatory continuing legal education, we had a captive audience, and could schedule those ethics and professionalism courses as part of the continuing legal education. Did
you say the Supreme Court acted on some proposals to require mandatory CLE during that time?
It had, that and IOLTA both had to be approved by the Tennessee Supreme Court.
Why on the professionalism and ethics point, why was there deemed to be a need to teach lawyers more about ethics and more about professionalism back in this was in the middle 80s, 1985 or so?
Well, there were those of us that were afraid being a lawyer was going to change from being a professional to a businessman. And the law practice was becoming more like a business and less like a profession. And we wanted to preserve the professionalism for lawyers. Lawyers were beginning to bill by the hour, regardless of what they accomplished. And they had gotten where they couldn't trust each other. We had lawyers that were really not trustworthy. And as the group of lawyers expanded, they didn't know each other. And so we felt that the profession was at a crossroads, and we needed to divert it so that it wouldn't become a pure business. That was the basic philosophy behind it.
What do you think about it, or how would you evaluate the practice of law now in 2003? Is it now more like a profession or more like a business, or how would you assess where we've come in the roughly 20 years since you were president of the Tennessee Bar Association?
Well, I have to say that I was privileged to practice in the golden years of the legal profession. And I think that there's still many lawyers, and probably a majority of lawyers who are fine professional people, upstanding, contributing citizens, that practice the profession as well as anybody in my era did. But there are others and that don't and haven't had the opportunity and haven't been taught professionalism. And I think it's not as attractive a life's work as it was when I was privileged to practice. But it's still, it still can be a good profession.
What advice do you have for those of us who are practicing law these days, early part of the 21st century? What lessons have you learned in your career that you think would be worthy for us to consider, for us and others that follow us to consider?
Well, lawyer, the legal profession is, in my judgment, a public service profession. You are not in it for self-aggrandizement or for to make a lot of money. You're in it to serve the public and to learn how to be a good citizen. I think you can still do that. And I think that a lawyer can still graduate from law school, go into a big firm, involve himself in community activities and professional activities, and still be a public service type person, and not a pure hard-nosed businessman. So I think it can still be done, Lee, but I think it's harder now. I wouldn't choose any other profession over lawyering at the present time.
Even though it's very different than...
It's very different. Yeah. It's very different.
What would you say would be the major differences that you've recognized since 1948, I guess nearly 50 years of practice of law? What are the major changes that you've seen in that time?
I don't think it's as much fun as we had. I had a good time practicing law. I'm a competitive type person. I enjoyed the healthy, friendly competition of trial work and business encounters and the collegiate atmosphere with other lawyers. I enjoyed that. And the bar associations and bar conventions and the meetings, that was a big part of my legal career.
In the late 1990s and early 2000s, we've had a number of corporate scandals, the Enron, WorldCom, a whole variety of things, and you've done a lot of law practice, corporate law practice in your 50-year career.
55
years. What have you seen in that perspective? How has the practice of law and I guess the scandals in the corporate world, why have they developed like this, and what can we do to rectify things?
I would use one word, and that's greed. And I look at some of the lawyers and some of them I know. I know a good lawyer on the Enron board, that was on the Enron board. How they voted as a member of the directors to pay those people what they paid them, in good conscience, I don't know. A lawyer should understand that the board represents the stockholders and not top management. And I think greed is all you can say. The lure of money and too much money has entrapped some people into doing things that they should know better than do. And I'm disappointed that the legal profession, the members of the legal profession involved in those big corporate scandals, the members didn't step in at an earlier date and put a stop to it.
What about the development of and the increasing opportunities for women in the practice of law? Your mother was a lawyer, but she never practiced, but now they're lawyers. Women have wonderful opportunities. How's that changed over your career?
Well, as I said, there weren't any women when I started. So that when my mama started, there were several that graduated about the same time I did. In my class, for example, there were three. Bob Cooper's mama was one of them. Kitty was in my class.
And that's Justice
Bob Cooper's wife. In fact, she was in my class, law class in Chapel Hill, and transferred when I did to Vanderbilt and graduated from Vanderbilt. There are plenty of, I don't see any discrimination against women in the profession now. Some of the best lawyers I know are women. And those that we have here and that I've worked with here, I'm very proud of. I think they have made a great name and advanced the cause of women lawyers. And I tip my hat to them.
Well, you're now retired. How are you approaching retirement?
Basically now, you probably don't know this, and I hate to expose it, but they still pay me something here. And I have told Keith Simmons that if I was running this law firm, I wouldn't pay me anything because I don't do anything. But
well, you do run our office over in Cashers, North Carolina.
I spend about half of my life nowadays in North Carolina. And one reason is I've already described my children over there and can come there. And that's the main reason I'm there. But I enjoy my life over there, and I'm enjoying life here too.
Do you do any law practice now?
No. I have a perfect excuse that I do not have a North Carolina license.
Do you miss the practice of law?
I do, and every now and then I see something going on in the law firm, some case, and I am tempted to stick my nose in it, but I hopefully have backed off from most circumstances because I believe it's passed me by now.
Well, if you had your legal career to do over again, would you do it any differently?
Well, gee, I don't know. You know, I might have stayed closer to the daily practice of law rather than business. I might have done some political things that I was involved in a little differently. There's a vote or two I made in the legislature that I might change. But, you know, you did the best you could at the time these things happened, and you just move on.
Would you advise young lawyers to participate in the political arena or not?
Oh, yeah. I think that not only is it do you learn about the legislative process, which is part of government and part of lawyers' responsibility to know about that, but you meet people from all over the state, and it broadens your ability to practice in different areas. you know. In the House of Representatives, I knew a lawyer in every county seat when I got through the legislature in Tennessee, and I think that has helped me.
You served in the for how long and what years in the legislature?
I just served one term in the House of Representatives.
1957 through 59.
Right.
Now, a lot of young lawyers, not only at Bass, Berry & Sims, but other firms, feel maybe that they can't participate as a public servant in the political process because of the time demands of basically a full-time legislature. Not really full-time, but almost. What would you say to the young lawyer that's weighing the obligations to the clients and to the firm and the obligations or the desire to participate in public service?
Well,
How do you balance those?
I would first say something to the firm. I would say that you're making a mistake and not allowing this person to do public service in the legislature. You know, my father was in the legislature, Jimmy Bass was in the legislature, I was, Frank Durrell was, and I think it was an important part not only of my legal training, but legal duty. And my dad would espouse that stronger even than I do. He would absolutely insist on it. You're lucky, Lee, that he wasn't around. He'd have had you in the legislature so fast before you knew it.
Well, we have really enjoyed our discussion this morning.
Well,
and
thank you.
We appreciate you sharing your life, some of your life and stories and wisdom with us. You know, I guess a lawyer is never supposed to ask another lawyer, is there something else I should have asked that I didn't, but I think under these circumstances I might get away with it.
Well, I would like to say on behalf of Tennessee Bar Foundation, as Barry here knows, I had a hand in starting that organization and I think was its first chairman, and I'm equally proud of the work that group has done. And I'm glad to have the opportunity to participate in this program. I think it's a fine thing for the foundation to do.
And for the record, you're talking about who is Barry? Barry
Bernstein, who is sitting here coaching me and probably now telling me it's time to close this down.
Woody, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank the foundation very much.